Hey, good morning. It's Pastor Matt here, and I am pleased to be able to come to you once again with a portion of God's Word. We're in our Sunday School lesson series in the book of Revelation, Behold, He Cometh, in our summer quarter. This morning, our lesson is the beasts, and our text is Revelation chapter 13. Revelation chapter 13. Now, as we get started, first of all, the key verse in our chapter, and we'll do our portions of the scriptures when we come to each point where they apply. Our key verse in the chapter is in verse 4, which says, "And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" Pretty, very ominous idea, and it gets even more so when we take a closer look at our text this morning. Our application is the student will discuss the power and evil personalities of the two beasts and their role in prophecy. Before we get into our text, let's take a quick first look here. So, according to the end of chapter 11, what we are looking at is still a result of the sounding of the seventh trumpet and the third woe. At least we don't see a deviation from that as of yet. Our kind of next main viewing in terms of events in the book of Revelation is the seven vials, right? We've seen the seven seals. We move to the seven trumpets. The seventh trumpet has sounded, which is the third woe. So far, that's what we've seen, okay? Chapter 12 marked the wonders that were shown in heaven concerning the woman, the dragon, and the child. We learn that the woman is Israel, the dragon is Satan, and the child is Jesus Christ. We learn that a war will have broken out in heaven between Michael and his angels and Satan and his angels. This is almost certainly futuristic. But what we find is Satan will have been defeated along with a third of the angels, and they will be cast down to the earth. He will turn his wrath against the holy city, Jerusalem. Many of God's people, in Israel in particular, will have been protected for 3.5 years. I believe that's what we see. Those in whom the mark was made in their forehead that we looked at in a previous chapter. But for those that are not protected and under that protection, Satan is going to turn his attention and his wrath on all of those that bear the testimony of Jesus Christ. And so that's kind of what we looked at last time. And in preparation for this, we now move forward. And the first point we look at, there are two beasts that are going to be spoken of. One came from the sea, one came from the earth. So concerning the beast from the sea, Revelation chapter 13, verses 1 through 8 is our focus on that. It says, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, and his seat, and great authority. And I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. Okay, so this is the what John saw. This is the vision that he had concerning this beast. So look at the description for a moment. And I think it's very clear that we're not talking about a literal beast here. This is not speaking of an actual animal, an actual beast, as it were, but all of these things symbolize something. And we'll see descriptions, and there's even more of the description of this in later chapters, but it also ties back to the book of Daniel. Daniel chapters 2 and 7 tie very much into this passage, and we'll look at those here in a moment also. But look at the description. It had 7 heads, and on those heads had 10 horns. And on the horns on the heads there were 10 crowns. And on the heads there were the names of blasphemy. Now, it doesn't tell us what the names of blasphemy are, but we can understand, the idea of blasphemy is insult or slander in its very base use, but more often than not, it refers to the diminishing of the position of God as God, and so it would almost certainly be directed specifically at God, and I would think even more so, given his glory in the time of the Gentiles that we're in, that this is speaking of Jesus Christ. So names that are specifically aimed at the diminishing of Jesus Christ. But we'll know when that time comes for sure. Okay. It's interesting because he says he's like a lion with feet like a bear and a mouth like a leopard, has feet like a bear's feet and has a mouth like a lion's mouth. And it's a very interesting connection because when you look at Daniel and the vision of the visions that you see there, there's connections to a leopard, a bear, and a lion, but distinctly separate beasts, as opposed to one beast. And so he uses all 3 in regard to this particular beast. Okay, one of his heads had a fatal wound, a wound as it were to death, I think it says here. So enough of a wound that it would kill him, but the fatal wound was healed and he either came back to life, or what would seem a fatal wound was not sufficient to kill it. Pretty crazy vision. Can you imagine exactly what John saw in this vision, and the amount of fear that would have struck him, this thing coming up out of the sea? It sounds like I've never seen a monster movie with something so crazy as this type of beast. I've seen several monster movies, but imagine this coming up out of the sea. And I would imagine that a lot of folklore and a lot of the monster movies that are out there probably derive very much from this very image, although they never really capture this in particular. But it's quite a vision for sure. But even scarier in reality is what this beast represents. And we find, according to the description, that this beast has a tremendous amount of power. The dragon, which is Satan, right? We already looked at that from the vision or the wonders in heaven that John saw in the previous chapter, that the dragon is Satan. And although he's not mentioned a lot in this passage, believe me that his hand is in everything that is going to be discussed in this chapter. And so, this Satan is very much part of this story. And the dragon, Satan, gave this beast his power, his throne, and his authority. Now, we often use the word power in description of both dynamic power and authoritative power. He actually uses it in both here. So his power, his seat, and his authority his dynamic power, and don't let anybody tell you that Satan has no power. Satan is extremely powerful. We just serve a more powerful God. But he gave his power, his throne, and his authority to this beast. Okay, now you might think, well, what kind of power could that be? Well, look at a couple comparisons here. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 3 and 4 says, "But if our gospel be hid, it is hid to them that are lost, in whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them." So he is called the God, and I don't have the Greek in front of me, but I believe it's the same word that we use for God, but it's qualified when it says the God of this world, the God that this world worships, the God over whom, over this world, who has the power. Okay, it does not mean he is God. God still has the ultimate control, but this world certainly has succumbed by and large to the power of Satan, to this dragon. And also look in chapter 2, all the way back in chapter 2 of Revelation, verses 12 and 13, it says, "Unto the angel of the church in Pergamos write, These things saith he which hath the sharp sword with two edges. I know thy works, and where thou dwellest, even where Satan's seat is." And the word for seat is thronos, which is throne, right? The same word that we see in our text in Revelation 13 here. When it says his seat, it's his throne, okay? Where Satan's seat is, or Satan's throne. "And thou holdest fast my name, and hast not denied my faith, even in those days wherein Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was slain among you, where Satan dwelleth." This is God's world ultimately. However, God has, for a time, allowed for Satan to have reign, so to speak, in this world. In fact, he offered that to Jesus during the temptation, if you remember. He says, I'll make all of this yours if you just bow down and worship me. But he forgets, and he knows, but he forgets that ultimately this world is the Lord's, and the Lord Jesus Christ will come back and take it from him, and he will be bound for 1,000 years. And so while Satan may have power here for the time being, he doesn't have power that God does not allow him. Okay, so the power, the seat, the authority, everything that Satan has, he is going to give that and focus that in this beast, which we will see in just a moment whom that is. Okay, and so that's where we look at the identity of these beasts. Let's examine first of all the head and the horns, right? The 7 heads, the 10 horns, and the 10 crowns. And in order to do that, we need to go back to the book of Daniel. And we first look at Daniel chapter 7. So this was a vision that Nebuchadnezzar had. Nebuchadnezzar being the Babylonian emperor, king, who had conquered the known world at that time, including Israel. And he had under his control men like Daniel, and then we know them by their Babylonian names more commonly, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And I always tend to forget their Hebrew names, but he had them under his power. But they came to have, based on different events and different things, they came to have influence in his life. And frankly, if it were not for their testimony, Nebuchadnezzar himself would likely have never come to know the one true God, Jehovah, as his God. And he did. There's a portion in Daniel later on where you see the actual testimony of Nebuchadnezzar acknowledging that God was the one true God. Okay, so Daniel is this young boy, and he's taken captive, and they're training him to be a governor in the Babylonian Empire. Okay, but Daniel's God is the one true God, and because God has given Daniel the ability to be able to clarify and explain the dreams of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar gives him authority, gives him favor in this kingdom. Okay, and so this is the vision that Nebuchadnezzar had. So in verses 7 and 8, it says, "After this I saw in the night visions, behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns." So here we have this vision of a beast with 10 horns. So far we see a connection. "I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of men, and a mouth speaking great things." Okay, so it's giving a little bit more information than our text in Revelation 13 gives us, but these are companion scriptures, and you can put them together. And so I'm not looking at the whole vision, right? In the previous verses, he explains the other beasts, and that's where you see the lion, the bear, and the leopard individually. And we're going to look at what those are in just a moment. But our focus is on just this fourth kingdom. Okay, that's this beast. Okay. And then in verses 20 and 21, it says, "And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows, I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints, and prevailed against them." Isn't that what we talked about? That Satan turned his focus against the saints, that was his intention. So we're seeing a lot of parallels and a lot of connections here between so far Daniel 7 and Revelation 13. Okay, so this was the vision. What did it all mean? What was the point of all of that? Okay, and so he gives an explanation, in verses 24 and 25, where Daniel is now, having heard the vision, he is explaining to him what these visions mean. And he says in 24 and 25, it says, "And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times, and the dividing of time." Okay, so this is Daniel's explanation of this fourth beast which is to come. Okay, to kind of put that into a broader perspective, we need to look at the 4 kingdoms that we see in Daniel chapter 2. Okay, this is speaking of a different vision, a earlier vision that Nebuchadnezzar had, but there were a lot of connections between them. Okay, so in Daniel chapter 2, verses 31 to 36, you see this dream that Nebuchadnezzar has. And it's interesting because in this one, Daniel didn't need to hear the dream. He told him what the dream was because God had revealed it to him. But in 31 to 36, it says, "Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. The image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet, that were of iron and clay, and break them to pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Now, if you already know about this dream and know the explanation of it, if you're like me, you're already very excited about what this dream represents. But I digress, and we go into the explanation here. So the first beast, remember, he's speaking to Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was the first Babylonian emperor. He conquered the world, the known world at that time, for his own empire, and he was in control. So Daniel is speaking to him. And so the first beast that we saw previous and in Daniel 7, and the head of gold in Daniel 2, he says in verse 37, Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given into thine hand, and he hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. And the first beast from Daniel 7 is that same thing. There's a parallel even within the book of Daniel, so that we can make the connection thereof. So the first beast, the head of gold, it's the Babylonian Empire. Okay, that's what it represented. He says, this is you. Of course, Nebuchadnezzar took it too far and made an image that was completely of gold, trying to advocate for his kingdom to be eternal, but obviously that didn't last. And within, I believe it was 70 years, his empire fell, and a new empire took over, and that's what we see in the second beast, and in the breasts of silver, I believe it's called. It's the Medo-Persian Empire. In verse 39a, where he says, And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee. Okay, now we can get into what made it inferior, what these empires look like. That's not the point. What I want to do is make the connection to what we're talking about in Revelation 13. Okay, and then there was a third beast in 39b, which says, And another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. This was the Greek Empire that came. Alexander the Great, having conquered the known world at that time, and that's under whom they were during that time. That was the third kingdom, the third beast. That was the torso of brass, as Daniel 2 talks about. Okay, and then the fourth beast was the Roman Empire. It says in verse 40, And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all things shall it break in pieces and bruise. So the fourth beast in Daniel 7, the legs of iron, that is the Roman Empire, brought about with the first Roman emperor, Caesar Augustus. Okay, why do we look at these things? Because what we find is there will be a revived fourth kingdom, and I believe it will be a revived Roman Empire of sorts. And look in 41 to 44, where it says, And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay, part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, and they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. So I've actually mixed two different things there. The what I believe is the revived Roman Empire, right? The connection with the iron from the legs. He says now it's iron mingled with clay, and those two things don't mix, so it will not last. And then finally, that stone that he talked about that will crush the image, and that will eventually come this great mountain that fills the earth. That is Jesus Christ. That is his second coming, his return. That one I have no doubt about. Okay, but the focus that I wanted to bring was on this fourth kingdom, which is a revived Roman Empire of sorts. And it may be that, when we look at the fact that this beast, that one of the heads was wounded fatally. Maybe that's I don't know if that's maybe a reference to an individual person, or if it's a reference to the fact that the Roman Empire, so far as we have seen, has ended. Or has it? And I think there's a connection here, because it says that they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. I suspect that the Roman Empire, as it was, it's no longer what it was. Now it's disguising itself in this earth, more specifically in terms of organized religion, and an organized religion that is very prominent on this earth, but it will revive and turn back into perhaps the semblance of the Roman Empire on this earth. Obviously, the Roman Empire lasting longer than any of them. The Babylonian Empire was only for 70 years. The Medo-Persians and the Greeks, I'm not certain, but obviously the Roman Empire lasted for hundreds of years before finally ending. But I think it's still there. We just, we don't recognize it as it is, or, at least not everybody does. So, I'm not going to get into explaining what I believe that is, because I think that'll just, either invite people to debate me, or perhaps they'll just shut me out completely. But, the truth is I don't know for sure. But I think that once these things come, we're going to know. And so we need to know these details in order to have a better understanding of what we're looking at. But one thing I can say is in chapter 7, this kingdom will be short-lived. According to chapter 7, verses 21 to 22, it says, "And I beheld, and that same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them until," and that is a big until, "the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom." So this iron and clay kingdom, this final beast that we see described, it will have reign, but for a very, very short time. And Jesus is going to come back and take control over the kingdom along with his saints. So, quick synopsis of what we're looking at. I believe there's good evidence to suggest that the beast itself is a picture of the rise of Antichrist. Right? We know that the scriptures tell us about the Antichrist, and I believe that's exactly. I have nearly no doubts on that concerning what this is. Maybe there's question as to whether the beast itself is the Antichrist, or maybe the beast itself is the revived Roman Empire, as it were, in order to bring up, for him to be able to take power, whatever it is, and however that looks, it's hard to say for sure. But it's revolving the rise of the Antichrist, to whom Satan, the dragon, will give his power, his throne, and his authority on this earth. In some sort, there will be an organization made up of 10 kingdoms, 3 of which will be supplanted and will be replaced by the little horn, which is the Antichrist, and he will have power on this earth. Okay, Perhaps the healing of the fatal wound will be indicative of a miraculous recovery or resurrection that he will use to persuade men to follow him. Perhaps it's more indicative of the revival of the Roman Empire that seemed dead but has still been here all along. He will blaspheme God, and he will make war with the saints. He will represent the revived Roman Empire in some form. His rule will be short-lived. Jesus will come and destroy the Antichrist. We know his fate, and the fate of the next beast is that they will be thrown into the lake of fire first. They will be the first inhabitants of the lake of fire. They even go before Satan himself, which he will be cast after the end of the millennial reign. But the Antichrist and the next beast that we'll look at will be thrown into the lake of fire and for all eternity. Okay? All right. And Jesus himself will take this world to himself, and he will reign, and his reign will be an eternal reign. Okay. The next beast is the beast from the earth, and for that we look at verses 11 through 18, which says, "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven, and on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that understandeth count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. All right. So this is the second beast, the beast from the earth. And just a quick description. We don't find as much detail about the second beast. Really, there's kind of 2 things that you see concerning his description: that he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. Okay, I think that we can I'm sure there's a meaning behind the 2 horns like a lamb. I don't know exactly what that is. Maybe it speaks to his that he has kind of a harmless and persona, at least as he is perceived. But I think that we can understand that he spoke as a dragon refers back to the dragon, which is Satan. He speaks of terrible things, but wonderful things, as it were, in the ears of men. Okay. What those actually really come down to and refer to, it's hard to say. But we understand that he has power, and he focused his power back to the benefit and the worship of the first beast. So he had all the power of the first beast. He directs the world to worship the first beast. He uses miracles and wonders in order to deceive men to worship the first beast. He urges the people to make an image to the first beast, which he will then give life to. He calls for everyone to worship the image of the beast under the threat of death. He forces all men to take the mark of the beast, without which they cannot buy or sell. It doesn't matter if they are rich and powerful or poor and powerless, they will all take the mark. And the number of the first beast is 666. It's not 666, it's 666. Okay. And it says it's the number of a man. Now, what will that number look like? We're really not sure. There's a lot of perception concerning that. There's been a lot of talk about ultimately that we'll be forced to take microchips in our right hands or in our foreheads that will contain all of our identity, perhaps even our the information and ability to draw from our financial institutions like banks. Years ago, probably 20 plus years ago, I saw, I watched commercials like from IBM and others where you see this guy walking through a store and he's just stuffing things into his pockets. And he's got this big trench coat on, he's got this long stringy hair, and he just looks rough, kind of even walks in a very kind of threatening manner. And then you watch him walk out the door without going to a cash register. But then you see this flash, and then he's stopped all of a sudden by a security guard. And the security guard says, "Hey, you forgot your receipt." And he hands him the receipt. The guy smiles and walks out. And, the idea was that eventually there would come a time where you just take what you need, and you're able to walk out the door. You don't have to scan all your items. You don't have to use cash. You don't even have to swipe your card or anything like that. That it will all be just done for you as you leave the store. And from a security standpoint, I mean, if you could imagine, it eliminates a lot of problems. From a practical sense, it sounds pretty cool that I don't have to carry a wallet with me. I don't have to worry about standing in line going. Isn't that part of the issue right now? We're all supposed to be distancing. If you eliminate the need for lines, then you don't have to worry about distancing, right? You just get what you need and walk out. Don't even have to interact with anybody else. It sounds pretty good from a logistical standpoint, but it's this mark in some sort that will keep people from buying or selling, which means that anybody that refuses this mark, you can no longer go to the store and get what you need, or you cannot own a business where you're selling things. All right, you can't exchange goods or services for money anymore on the basis of this. So, there, from a logistical standpoint, there's a lot of appeal to this. But when you understand that you are basically pledging allegiance to this beast, then there's something to be said about that. And it kind of draws a line here saying that everyone that does not have his name written in the Lamb's Book of Life will take the mark. Everyone that does have their name written in the Lamb's Book of Life will not take the mark, and they will be killed, or at least attempted to, for refusing this. So, man, I look around us and I see what's going on in our world, and I'm thinking it would be prime. It's getting to be prime time for a system like this to come into play, because it'll put a lot of problems in our world in check. Right? They're trying to overthrow the system as we speak. Who knows if they'll be successful? Who knows if they will over? I mean, they're talking about defunding police departments. All of these things that are going on. If you're going to take away the ability for people to be free completely and not even have their privacy, you'll be able to keep tabs on them a lot better, and then maybe you don't even need like the police department or this or that, because then all these criminals, you can find them, and you better believe there will be some sort of a motivation to be able to take this, pledging allegiance to this beast or whatever it is. So who knows how soon something like this will come. I'm just kind of spitballing here. I'm just kind of giving my take on it based on what we're seeing in our world. But it's going to get crazy. It's going to get crazy. So the synopsis for this beast is the false prophet. The scriptures talk about the false prophet. His goal is to turn focus and attention onto the Antichrist. That is his goal, is to get this world to turn and to bow to the Antichrist. Okay? So, he comes to proclaim and demand the worship of the Antichrist. He will perform wonderful works before people to convince them to worship the Antichrist. He will exercise death on those that refuse to bow. He will force all men to take the mark of the beast, without which people will be cut off from buying and selling. Okay, that is his goal. It's really the focus of this is all about the Antichrist, but we know that Satan is behind all of this. We don't really see as much about the dragon in this case, but the Antichrist is there to do the will of Satan. It doesn't matter that this Antichrist is taking worship where maybe worship to the dragon would be more appropriate, because ultimately the goal of Satan is to just steal worship and glory away from God. That's his goal. That's what he tries to do. And so, why do you think there are so many different religions out there? Why wouldn't it just be Christianity and Satanism? Satanism is out there, but it's not real prevalent. But you have all of these other religions out there, all of them that deviate from the scriptures, from the Bible, are false. Even so-called Christian religions that deviate from the Bible are completely false, and Satan is completely pleased with that. Why? Because every single one draws glory away from God. That is his goal. Okay, and of course, then the false prophet, we see he comes to take or give glory to the beast, this Antichrist. Okay, so in a quick final word here, there's two main points. Right, we're only seeing 2 points, and most of that is description. You can boil that down to these are things to consider about the coming of the Antichrist, and then the false prophet who will be there to proclaim his praises. But there's 2 things that I want us to really look at in this. 2 things. First of all, the Antichrist represents a world government. He represents a world government. He will have complete and utter control on this earth, and all of the world, apart from those who are belong to Christ, will give their complete support and worship to him. People will be happy to worship him. Okay, so he represents world government. The false prophet represents world religion, and it's my opinion that this revived Roman Empire, as it were, is what's going to bring both of these about. That there will be a one world government and a one world religion, and they go hand in hand. And so, as we are kind of looking for these things, and we are looking for these things, based on what we're seeing in this world and everything that's going on, it wouldn't surprise me in the very least if we start to see very clearly these things start to take place. And so we need to take heed, we need to take warning, and we need to understand, okay, we need to look for a world government, and we need to look for a world religion. Okay? That's kind of what we need to look for. Okay? Who knows when these things are going to take place at all. It could be years into the future, but, because, even the Thessalonians 2,000 years ago thought that Jesus was going to come back in their time based on the things that were going on. So we could be off on this. The Bible says that no man knows the day or the hour, but we need to be prepared as if they were to come in our time. We need to look for the Antichrist, knowing that he's coming, and we need to be prepared for the false prophet as well. Because even Satan himself, he disguises himself as an angel of light. They're not going to come in and be like, "Oh, this guy's a beast. I wonder if we should follow him." No, you're gonna look at, as the Antichrist, someone that's very powerful and admirable, and the false prophet, someone that seems trustworthy. Right? Isn't that what you want in your religious leaders? Is someone that's trustworthy? So it's not going to be on the surface that these guys are beasts, right? They're going to look good, but we need to be prepared for when they come. And ultimately, the best preparation we can do, the things that we need to do in order to know that that we're doing what Christ has required of us, is that we need to get out and tell people about Jesus Christ. I don't know that I would start explaining about a beast of this sort or a false prophet or anything like that, because I don't think it's going to make much sense to those who are not spiritually minded. The best that we can do is that we can share the gospel with them. If they accept, praise God. If they don't, well, that's between them and the Lord. We've done what God has required of us. Okay? And ultimately, we need to understand, like I said in Daniel, that kingdom, whether it's coming soon or it's in the distant future, it's going to be very short-lived. Right? 3.5 years. It talks about that 42 months, that comes down to about 3.5 years. That's all that it will be. Not 70, not hundreds of years as the first Roman Empire. 3.5 years. And what happens at the end of that? Jesus is coming. He's that stone that is going to crush all of the kingdoms of this earth, that they will become his, that he will be on the throne of his father David in Jerusalem, that Jerusalem will be the seat of not only the Jewish kingdom, but for the entire world, and ultimately his reign will extend into the eternal ages. And we need to hold on to that. We need to hold on to that. It's going to get worse before it gets better, but then the best is yet to come. And that is what excites me. That is what we have to look forward to. Thank you so much for your attention. I pray that this has been a blessing for you. It has certainly been exciting and a blessing for me. I'm excited to see what is coming ahead soon. All right. God bless you all.